Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. I am eternally grateful. It's always a pleasure speaking with Raman Yang, who's now CCTV, but I've followed him from the time when he was at Radio Africa, The Standard, and we spoke about the shilling. So thank you, Rama, for that interview. Macro thoughts. Robert Allen Ward tweeted the 15 fastest growing economies in 2015, 5 are in Africa, 2 in BRICS, India and China, and Papua New Guinea is still number 1. Home thoughts. I went back to Paul Virilio and you'll see why. He said the speed of light does not merely transform the world, it becomes the world. Globalization is the speed of light. Sebastião Salgado is an extraordinary photographer, and I'm going to put up 2 photographs of his, and he really has this sort of ability to tap into the fringes of the 21st century. Political reflections. Plenty happened at 4:30 in the morning in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. King Salman has appointed the Deputy Crown Prince Mohammed bin Nayef as the Crown Prince. That's the first important point to note. I'll put up a photograph of him. The longest serving foreign minister in the world has now retired. That's Saud al-Faisal. And Nada, who tweets under DN Doshi, says she loves him. And I'll put up a photograph of him that she posted. Sultan A. Qasemi tweeted on April 25th, young prince leads Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen, and posted a photograph of him. I'll post that photograph as well. The Telegraph said that the Saudi prince, it has to be Talal, criticized for offering Bentleys to pilots bombing the Yemen. And so you can see there's plenty going on there. An Iranian military commander says Saudi Arabia is teetering on the edge of collapse. And one can suspect these last moves are, as you teeter, you do all kinds of things, but I don't lend credence to that. But I do think Saudi Arabia is a lot more fragile. It reminds me more of something like the Shah of Iran's peacock throne sometime around 75, 76. The revolution happened in 79. This top Iranian commander has lashed out at the Saudi aggression against Yemen, saying Riyadh is on the verge of collapse. Today, Saudi Arabia is brazenly and obnoxiously bombarding and massacring a nation which is seeking the denial of the hegemonic system, said Commander of the Islamic Revolution Guard Corps, Major General Muhammad Ali Jafari. Today, Al-Saud is teetering on the edge of collapse. He called on Iranian officials to pull no punches in hitting out at Saudi Arabia over its aggression against Yemen. Now that the attacks have been launched against Yemen, no considerations should be shown. He further called Saudi Arabia betrayer, saying today Saudi Arabia, the betrayer, is following in the footsteps of Israel, and the Zionists is not a happy man. Bloomberg tweeted that President Obama gave the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe an impromptu tour of the Lincoln Memorial. Put up that photograph, it's quite evocative. ABC News, and this is from yesterday evening Kenya time, nearly 200 arrests, 144 vehicle fires, 15 structure fires in Baltimore riots. That took me back to Speed and Politics by Paul Virilio, and if you haven't read it, you should. The revolutionary contingent attains its ideal form not in the place of production, but in the street, where for a moment it stops being a cog in the technical machine and itself becomes a motor, machine of attack. In other words, a producer of speed. CNN tweeted nearly 200 arrests and posted the following photograph. And then finally, the Australian says Ben Quilty's message to Joko Widodo was, tonight you will kill 2 good men, my friends. Gross GDP is probably expanded only 1% in the US in the first quarter, according to a Reuters survey of economists. This would be a step down from Q4's 2.2% pace and mark the weakest reading in a year. I don't think the first quarter, and I agree with Thomas Kostek, an economist at the Standard Chartered Bank in New York, the first quarter is not a true reflection of the health of the US economy right now. But what it's done, it's unwound extreme dollar bullish positioning and created a big sell-off in the dollar, where you've seen big rallies, particularly in the commodity-based currencies. But I expect the US economy to rebound big time in Q2. The euro is here at 109.95, all set to test 110 and probably go as high as 110.57. The dollar index falling below 96. Japanese yen, that's actually proving reasonably stable, 118.94 at the moment. Swissy 0.9566 when I checked last. The pound 153.85. I walked in this morning, it was 153.36. And the Aussie is, I think, just above, just below 0.80. India rupee 63.185, South Korean 110.6808, the Rial 293.84. Still think it's going to fall. Egyptian pound 763.70, and the South African rand, when I looked this morning, 1184.90. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. I'm still bullish. I think this is an opportunity to get back in. Euro dollar points now at 110.57, very, very jumpy to the upside, and I think there's very little that's going to stop it getting there, frankly, at the moment. But I think the story doesn't change. I think part of the story was this first quarter weakness we saw in the US. It's taken a lot of bulls, grab them by the horns, in point of fact, and pull them up. But I'll put up a 3-month chart of the euro dollar. I still think we're going to parity and below. Nanex LLC, who by now you know I follow on Twitter, produces very interesting visuals, tweeted NASDAQ trade outage affected 1,080 NASDAQ listed symbols, and put up this diagram. Then he said NYSE reviewing suspicious trades in Twitter. The one circled in the chart I sent earlier. I posted this photograph. I then saw that Twitter said revenue rose to $436 million in the first quarter, up from $250.5 million. But the average analyst estimate was $456.8 million. Concerns about Twitter were exacerbated when the results were leaked before the market closed. Market data firm Celerity tweeted the figures, saying it had found the release on Twitter's investor relations website. Twitter blamed the NASDAQ, which it said managed its investor relations website. Everything looked weaker than expected, said Arvind Bhatia. This sort of loss of momentum is probably going to cause a bigger outside reaction than in normal circumstances. Twitter shares closed down 18.2% at $42.27, fell further to $41.89, and I think you should buy them at this price. Nanex LLC then did another tweet, something woke the algos in Twitter, and posted this. It sort of explains quite a bit of the price action. MIT tweeted Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, saying the MIT is a center of innovation in the world. Alitalia CEO wants 5-star airline with flair, backed by Etihad. Silvano Cassano was offered a chance last year to go back to running a company after working as a consultant. He told himself, if it's in Italy, no thanks. Today he oversees not just any company. He's agreed to take on one of Italy's biggest corporate turnarounds, Alitalia SPA. After decades of losses and defecting customers, Cassano is making a last-ditch effort to rebuild the national carrier. His plan, dropping unprofitable short-haul routes in favor of intercontinental flights, upgrading technology, and pampering customers with better food and seats. Former executive of Fiat and Benetton says Alitalia can only thrive as a 5-star airline. Consumers are saying, give us an excuse to come back to you. They want the love affair. to start again. The euro is just crossing 110 as I do this podcast. A small airline can survive only if it gets into the niche, lucrative premium segment of long-haul flights, said Andrea Gioricci, a professor at Milan's Bicocca University who studies the aviation industry. Samsung Electronics overtook Apple as the top smartphone maker in Q1. This is Strategy Analytics. And if you haven't seen our little clipette from the launch of the S6H, please do have a look at it. It's on Rich Wrap-Ups. Gold was at 1210.99 when I walked in, now trading 1208. It's had a very big rally over the last two sessions, and I think whatever happens with the currency markets, it's due a pause. Crude oil around the 56.70 level. I think, and I'm going to put a 5-day chart in, and you'll see it's been flying up and flying down, but I think, quite possibly the 2015 top is in. Dmitry Rybolovlev alleges that Yves Bouvier misled him about the price of Mark Rothko's number 6 violet, green and red. I'll post a photograph of it, and as you know by now, Rothko is one of my favourite artists. Robert Fisk went to visit Abu Dhabi, calls it the acceptable face of the Emirates. While Qatar and Dubai are bywords for excess, vulgarity, human rights abuses, the UAE's capital affects a higher calling. So alongside the Emirates Palace Hotel, 1,022 crystal chandeliers, the Grand Mosque, capacity 40,000, and 4 million foreign workers. There are galleries, museums, seats of learning, and the stated aim of being a role model for its neighbours. Has Abu Dhabi found a way to blend petrodollars with principles, he asks. The Abu Dhabi Louvre, and I'll put up a photograph that I took when I visited, looks like the top of a giant primordial eggshell pushing its way out of the sand. Its giant dome already glisters under the sun, its construction workers moving like spiders over 5 layers of cladding, steel and aluminium, which will give this extraordinary museum a combined weight of 7,000 tons. It's very beautiful, actually. At 7,000 tons is just a little less than the Eiffel Tower. Already, the concrete base of a man-made lake spreads around the construction for architect Jean Nouvel's Louvre will be on a miniature island, its works of art transported to its gallery through an underground tunnel. Light sprinkled into its interior, as if through the fronds of palm trees. Very romantic. Abu Dhabi is so rich and its ambition so mystical that people speak in whispers, saying it's the sensible adult version of Dubai, smaller than its neighbour, but probably the wealthiest city in the world. It's still ruled by the Al Nahyan family, whose Bani Yas tribe migrated to the North Arabian Peninsula Gulf Coast opposite what is now Iran in the late 18th century. So rich is Abu Dhabi, with an oil-producing capacity of 2.3 million barrels a day, that even its total investment statistics it prefers to keep secret must be calculated to the nearest 70 billion. The total figure is probably close to $650 billion. And then quoting somebody saying, "I'm here as a servant of the country. I know if I don't want to be a servant anymore, I can get on a plane and go home." Then he thought for a moment and captured the finality of it all. We're all here by invitation or temptation. I put up a photograph that I took of the Louvre when we visited there last year. Another one of the chandelier, the Swarovski chandelier in the Grand Mosque, which is very grand. And as I exited the mosque, I saw this Apache helicopter gunship flying over the top. It's quite a sort of interesting counterpoint, I thought. Investors have taken Russia out of the penalty box. The ruble has gained 17.5% against the dollar after losing nearly half its value in 2014. Russia's stock index denominated in the ruble has soared to 20% this year, through what I was saying. I was a little bit early about how cheap it looked on any rational analysis that you could think of. IGAD, coming to Africa, will now think of a different and innovative approach to solve the conflict. IGAD's chief negotiator Semu Mesfin told reporters, saying that 90% of differences between the two sides are resolved, but some issues are still a deal breaker. The UN Security Council has passed a resolution paving the way for sanctions, with the diplomat close to the talks saying Kira and Machar would be targeted if a lasting deal is not struck soon. If they reject this agreement, they will be sanctioned. A diplomat close to negotiations said their bank accounts will be frozen and they will be subject to a travel ban by the UN Security Council. Well, something's got to give. There was some talk that there was a third solution, and that third solution was an individual I know quite well. Burundi violence confounds US optimism about African democracy. Jonathan's actions to accept the results and congratulate President-elect Muhammadu Buhari, as well as his steps today to ensure a successful transition, have strengthened Nigeria's democracy and set a strong example for Africa and the world, said Joseph Biden in a statement after the results rolled in. But Burundi and Guinea are quick proof that Biden's assumptions about the impact of Jonathan's concession would have elsewhere on the continent should not have been so optimistic. Burundi, of course, we've been speaking about that. Thousands have fled to neighbouring Rwanda to avoid what is happening. A fellow called J.C. Cannon tweeted, Burundi, the second unhappiest place in the world, is on the brink of civil war. And then, according to Reuters, crowds were on the streets yesterday waving placards marked with the message, "No to the third term." Police fired tear gas, shot in the air to disperse hundreds of people protesting. Crowds gathered from early in the morning. Malcolm Webb tweeted, police drive off after padlocking gate of the closed Radio Publique Africaine of Burundi. So clearly a very, very volatile mix over there. Foreigners not to blame for unemployment. This is Julius Malemo. Quite an interesting bit of video footage. He is very clever politically, I must say. South African all-share, although it closed 0.27% lower, managed to hold on to 55,000 for the second consecutive session ever. And it has really performed. It's up 12.12% so far this year. Dollar rand, when I looked in the morning, 1184.90, with the euro near 110, it's probably doing better than that. The Egyptian stock market is down 5.61% so far this year, and has actually fallen 17.073% since February the 4th, 2015. Nigerian all shares up 1.41% year to date, but has bounced 23.72% since February the 13th, when worries about the election were at their peak. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 0.61% so far this year. Bati profit misses estimates on Africa currency declines. The currency devaluation is beyond their control, said an analyst. Revenue in Africa fell 12% to 62.2 billion rupees in the last quarter, from 70.6 billion rupees in the year earlier period. However, on a constant currency basis, revenue in Africa increased 3%, so that's something good. Bharti Airtel chairman and managing director, of course, is Sunil Mittal. I'll put up his photograph. Zambia's ZESCO restoring electricity after nationwide power cut, and this spilled over into Zimbabwe as well. Zambia's power utility started restoring service after an electricity cut halted supply to 8 of the country's 10 provinces, damaged mines in the continent's second biggest copper producer. A disturbance at 7:31 p.m. on Monday led to a shutdown of generators while restoration started at 1:20 a.m. The IMF is saying that Africa's labour force newcomers will exceed the entire world by 2035. Sub-Saharan Africa will have more people joining the labour force in 20 years than the rest of the world combined, according to the IMF. And this is this demographic dividend or time bomb, depends how you look at it. Coming into Kenya, Scan Group reported full-year profit before tax declined 5.726%. WPP, Martin Sorrell, of course, is the majority shareholder in Scan Group. Full-year billings up 19.382%. Full-year revenue up 33.5055%, although consolidating a number of other businesses into there. Operating and admin expenses climbed 23.79%. Interest income up 559%. And I'll come to that in a minute. They did not repeat a share of profit from a previous joint arrangement. And in the previous year, they had a full year gain on revaluation of an equity interest of about 623 million shillings. That wasn't repeated. So profit before tax down 5.726%. Profit after tax down 24.76%. Full year earnings per share down a whopping 42.3%. But if you stripped out, according to them, the effect of one-off revaluations, earnings per share was £1.50 versus 47 cents previously. They revised profit after tax total comprehensive income for 2013 downwards. Organic revenue growth was over 10%, they're saying. Reportable revenue growth was 33.5%. Organic revenue growth in Kenya was 5%, so core market represents 67% of total billings. It's a WPP company now, and it is the preeminent sub-Saharan vehicle, and as such, I expect the regional franchise to gain traction, reduce Kenya's share, just to go back to that interest income, 27.2%, more than a quarter of profit before tax came from interest income. Bharath was a great guest at Mindspeak, and he said something which still resonates with me. He said, you've got to follow your passion. And indeed he did. I'll put up a link for his Mindspeak session as well. TPS, Serena Hotels, reported full year profit after tax declining 39.15%. Full year sales was only down 7.001%, which isn't bad, all things considered. Big depreciation charge of 426.237 million. Full year profit before income tax down 51.19%. Full year profit after tax down 39.15%. Earnings per share, they're paying out the entire earnings per share as a final dividend. EPS was down 40.265%. In their commentary, year 2014 proved to be another challenging year for the company, as the tourism industry has been battling to rebound from a series of setbacks since the year 2013. The setbacks include elevated travel advisories and other forms of security alerts issued by governments of main source markets, growing threat of terrorism and local security incidents, introduction of VAT on tourism services and park fees in September 2013, which continue to make Kenya uncompetitive relative to other safari destinations. The Ebola bookings for units, this is interesting, in Tanzania witnessed extensive cancellations for the period, September 2014 to March 2015. Kenyan coast is experiencing an unprecedented business crisis. Corporate business segments contributed positively. Positive results can be considered satisfactory within the overall context of a business environment that was challenging. You can say that again. In 2015, Serena is expected to begin the extension and refurbishment projects at Nairobi Serena Hotel, Kampala and Dar es Salaam. Look, all these issues were known, as Donald Rumsfeld would say, and if you haven't seen that interview I did last year with Mahmood, he brought up all these issues in a very articulate and considered manner. And therefore, I think this is a creditable performance when considered against that backdrop. There is, however, no silver bullet that I can see that's going to sort out the tourism industry at this point in time. They have a selection of wonderful properties, which I'm sure if you've watched my podcast you've seen before, but let me just give you a couple. This is Lake Elmantaita, which is a beautiful property they've got. And, the Serena, I've known it since my childhood, and I wrote a piece about it a couple of years ago. And let me read it again. My memories of the Serena started in Mombasa years back when the managing director, Mahmood Jan Mohammed, was the manager. I was then a teenager and remember losing my heart to a girl who would beat me at table tennis. Well, I let her. She was wearing a bikini, for goodness sake. That table tennis table is still there. It is. The Serena brand has always been sprinkled with a fairy dust and reminds me of happy, joyful, carefree, halcyon days of youth, as you'd imagine. That brand equity is really something valuable. So it's got brand. It's got a lot of longevity, but they're navigating some very tough, choppy waters on that note. I've got a photograph I took, and that's myself in that pool actually swimming. It's 18 minutes past 6, 1,484 days ago. Express Kenya reported a full year loss after tax. They'd already warned with the profits warning. They reported a loss of about 76.435 million shillings. The market cap of this company is $2 million. Full year revenue was down sharply, more than half. The group said they've been going through a period of business instability due to the loss of key contracts. The board is in the process of diversification into the real estate sector. Well, going by yesterday's stats I shared with you, you would see why. Kenya shilling is trading at 94.457. Forex reserves were down sharply to $6.88 billion from $7.45 billion at the end of last December. And there's been a lot of intervention and also revaluation losses. The Nairobi All-Share firmed up a marginal 0.06% yesterday. It's up 5.408% year to date. NSE 20 remains negative 1.1115% year to date. Once again, thank you kindly for stopping by and listening to my ruminations. I do appreciate it.